G'day. Welcome to the AgriCoach podcast for families on the land who want to grow their family's wealth and prosperity across the generations. I'm your host, Ben Law, and I'm the financial bloke. G'day. Welcome back to the AgriCoach Wealth and Wisdom podcast. My name's Ben Law, and I'm the financial bloke. Today, we're bringing you another live recording from the 2024 Australian Cotton Conference held on the Gold Coast this month. I'm interviewing Andrew and Meagan Lawrie from Gogango, west of Rockhampton in Queensland. And Rabo has asked me to do this, and it's in front of a live audience. So why are we talking to Andrew and Meagan? Well, they successfully navigated the succession process about 20 years ago with Andrew's family. Now they've come full circle and are embarking on the same journey with their own kids. In the episode, we'll discuss the original succession process they went through with Andrew's family, some of the challenges they faced, and how persistence and a focus on strengthening family relationships led to an absolutely fantastic outcome. We delve into what they believe is the secret to a successful transition and how they're applying those lessons to their current journey with their kids. We'll also get to hear from their son Alex, who's representing the next generation, to get a perspective on how the family are tackling succession right now. So before we kick off, I just want to say the recording is in front of a live audience. It's not going to be perfect. It's not like when I recorded in the studio and we've got full control over the audio. So it's going to be a little bit less than perfect. So just bear with me. It's worth the effort. The feedback we got from everyone on the day was fantastic, and there's some real gold nuggets in there if you're looking at going through succession or it's somewhere in your future. So without further delay, let's get cracking. Welcome everyone today. I'd firstly like to thank Cotton for putting on this event. I think there's 2,500 people here, which is amazing. And normally I'm sitting in a spare room in my house in the podcast studio interviewing someone across a computer screen. So this is a bit of a challenge and a bit different for me. I just want to also thank Rabo for putting on this event. They're sponsoring it. They've brought me along. They've organised the lorries to come down, and a special thanks to Jen McCauley, who's down there. So Jen and the team who always put on these events and do an amazing job. And I want to thank you all for coming along as well. This is a topic which I love, but scares the hell out of most families. So hopefully you'll learn something today. So let's get stuck in. So succession, as I said, is my favourite topic. It scares the hell out of a lot of people. And I've been watching and studying this topic for about 25 years now. And what the research shows and my anecdotal evidence tells me is about 70% of succession plans or wealth transfers fail, which we can argue whether the stats are exactly right, whether it's more or less, but it's 70% or anywhere near that. It should be unacceptable as an industry. But I guarantee each of you in the room will know someone that's had either a bad succession experience themselves or they've seen someone else go through that. I think we all have to agree that most families on the land are worried about their family and their future, and they want to leave a legacy. And I think the number one thing most families want is to be able to sit down around the dinner table at Christmas, which seems to be something a lot of families don't seem to be able to achieve. Now, there's some good news and some bad news. I'm going to start with the bad news first. The bad news is just because you're a bloody good farmer doesn't mean you're going to have a good succession plan. Quite often, good farmers fall into the trap of thinking just having a good farm will make me successful. The good news is yeah, it's difficult, but it's not undoable. It's if you focus on the right things, you'll get success. And the 30% do it and do it well. Now, over my time, I've been watching the 30% that do it well, and I've worked with a number of those families. I've observed them, I've studied them, and there's a couple of traits that they all have. And the first trait is they've got a growth mindset. So they're always trying to do things better. Number two, they're usually bloody good farmers. And that's because they're trying to do things better all the time. They focus on excellence. But the number one thing that sets successful families apart from the unsuccessful families is they focus on the family. And they're what I call a high-performing family. Now, what is a high-performing family? Well, a high-performing family isn't the biggest, because that's usually what someone says to me. Oh, they're a high-performing family. They've got the most money, the most acres. They're the ones who win the awards. And I'll just refer you on to a family that you see. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. What they do is they focus on preparing themselves, they prepare the business, and they prepare the next generation. And so when we wanted to do this episode, or this talk, Jen and I talked about, well, we've got to find a family that's done this well, and what I call a high-performing family. Now, the biggest mistake people make is they think the people that do succession well do everything well, but they don't. They just manage to do enough of the right things right to get through. And that brings me to Andrew and Meagan Lawrie, who are here today. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that this is a big thing to get up in front of everyone and talk about succession. Not many people would do it. And when we reached out, they said, we'd love to come and talk about it. Warts and all, isn't that right? Now, for those of you who don't know Andrew and Meagan, and most of you won't, they're on Moora Plains, which is 3,500 hectares of prime country on the banks of the Fitzroy River, which is about 65 k's west of Rockhampton. And it's beautiful country up there. I've been there. They've got 3 adult children, Jess, who's 30, Alex, who's 27, and Sam, who's 24. 2 beautiful grandchildren have arrived not too long ago, which is fantastic to see. So the next generation's starting to sniff around. Andrew worked off the farm for 15 years as a diesel fitter, so he went off farm himself before he returned home to the property. Meagan didn't grow up on the farm, so she came from a non-farming background, which means it had a unique challenge, but fell in love with the land. I think you said you might have been tricked into going out to the farm thinking it'd be better than it was, but fell in love with the land and the lifestyle and is passionate about her family and that. They started succession planning back in 2000, I think it was, Andrew, with your parents and brother, and they're currently going through the next generation of a succession plan with their kids, starting discussions formally in the last year or so. Like most high-performing families, they're humble. They don't say they've got all the answers, they don't do everything right, and they're just here to share their journey and what worked for them. And it's a big thing to get up here. So without further delay, I'd like to welcome Andrew and Meagan, and also Alex, who's going to be on video today. So we're going to kick off with you, Andrew. First off, you're the one thrown under the bus, so...
No worries.
Now, firstly, 20 years ago, as we said, you started the succession process with your family, which was your mum and dad and your brother, and obviously, Meagan, you were involved at that stage. And there were issues, I'm sure, but it appears that you produced a pretty good outcome overall. And now you're in the midst of doing that next stage with your kids. So can you start for everyone just giving us a bit of a high-level summary of the succession process you went through with your parents and Peter, your brother, and how that experience went and how it shaped how you're dealing with your kids now?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So, yeah, like Ben said, Meagan and I moved back onto the farm into the house that I grew up in 2000 and entered into a partnership with Mum and Dad and my brother. At that time, Dad had only had ownership and management for about 10 years after it took him a long time to get to that point. So for us to turn around and start putting some pressure on to hand it over again, it was a big ask, but to Mum and Dad's credit, plenty of times Dad has told people that I thought they were bloody stupid, but let them do it anyway, and so we're forever grateful that Mum and Dad did what they did. And working our way through that, I've got an older sister as well, and she understood that if she wanted her share, we were no longer viable. So there were concessions made for us to continue on to keep working the place.
And so did you say that your dad had only been in control of the business for 10 years before he started the succession with you, is that correct?
Yeah, so he took it over in the early 90s. Yeah, so he hadn't been running things long when we're knocking at the door. And I remember the conversation that my brother and I had with Dad and said, do you want a couple of ringers or do you want us to be involved in the management? And he said, no, I want you to be involved in management. And we said, well, you're sure? Because if you want a couple of ringers, get a couple of ringers and we'll come back when you're ready. And, he was all for it and gave us the reins. We really made some massive changes to the way he used to do business.
And from your point of view, Meagan, was it a little bit daunting back then?
Very daunting and quite stressful, the whole succession planning process. I guess it made it a lot easier because we got the education and training we needed through RCS and got the help we needed to go through that process. There were a lot of things not talked about, which became a problem later on, which was resolved with facilitation. But yes, we did get a great outcome, but it took 7 years to achieve that.
Because a lot of families think that you have one or two meetings with a succession planning facilitator or your accountant or lawyer, and then all of a sudden, wacky-do, you've got this 10-page document, there's your succession plan, off you go. I'm guessing it wasn't like that if it was 7 years.
We really just worked on ourselves. Everyone in the family did some work on themselves, and I think that was really important to get to the stage where we were able to have a conversation openly and honestly.
Which a lot of families struggle with, don't they? It's the stuff that goes unsaid, not talked about. They don't come back to the table. And so was there someone in the family that kept bringing people back to the table?
I think the boys, they are the ones who would say, we need to have that conversation. We need to talk about, the issues that aren't being talked about. And they were the ones who continued to bring the family together, and we achieved, some amazing results. We did have some pretty heated arguments, but we worked through that.
Discussions.
Is that what happens at home, is it, Andrew?
I'm not sure.
Because we have discussions in our house, which is instructions. And so you said you and your brother sort of managed to keep pushing things forward. Did you and your brother have a close relationship at the beginning to be able to do that, or how did that work?
It's really nice now to be able to look back on it. For me, working away and probably communicating to my brother, especially through Dad and through Mum more particularly, I was sort of building the opinion that he was fairly lazy and entitled, and he was getting similar sorts of stories about me. So it was really refreshing to work together and find out that we got along really well. So it was a really nice change, and we have a really good relationship to this day.
Today's episode is brought to you by AgriCoach. You've worked bloody hard over the years and you've built a solid operation. But as your children grow up and start their own journeys, you're beginning to think about the next 5, 10, and even 15 years and how to keep driving the business forward and ensure a smooth and successful succession plan. Preparing the business, preparing the next generation, and preparing for your eventual retirement all requires a solid plan and a proven process. Unsure about the right steps to take? Head on over to agricoach.com.au/webinar to learn more about our Succession Proof Your Family webinar. AgriCoach, aligning families, growing wealth, and protecting legacies. And now, let's get back to the episode. That's a great result, because a lot of times the succession is the breaking of relationships rather than bringing them closer together. Meagan, I want to ask you this. We all agree that being in a strong financial position as a family is really important. We want to have a solid business. We want to build our balance sheet. We want to build our, get a solid profit coming through from the business. But what I've often found is the families that are successful say that, family financial strength is just as important as the strength of the family unit. So our family relationships are just as important. And I always say, ignore your family relationships at your peril. So do you agree with that philosophy? And how did you work and how are you working on maintaining those family relationships?
They're super important to us, like families, the most important thing to us. We've seen family members not talking to each other, and we didn't want that for our family. So we've been working super hard to give the boys and Jess some training so they're in line with what we're doing. And we've just taught them to be good people, to be able to come to us, to talk to us about anything. And that's why we've started the process with Proactive and starting to do the succession planning with our children.
Yeah, because it's interesting, 60% of the reasons successions seem to fail is because of a breakdown in trust and a lack of communication. And I think that's something we have to remember as a family to push forward. And the thing is I'm guessing, like most families, some people in the family are better communicators than others. I'm guessing that's probably been the same from time to time. Andrew, how have you guys as a family worked towards improving communication, especially when it got to the point where it started to break down?
It was all about the training, especially to do GFP early on and continue to work with RCS. Those skills that we taught to go through the executive process we learned how to manage meetings, we learned how to have a conversation that may get fairly strong but was still constructive, so we could continue to move forward through it. It was training and more training. And I mean, stock handling skills help with people as well. It's more training, yep.
It's interesting. A couple of people have said to me low stock handling courses have been the thing that saved their family. Did you find that learning how to deal with the personality types?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it also wakes you up to your own personality type. Landmark education also had a big part to play in being able to recognise people for who they were and being okay with that. It's just been about the training.
Yeah. And so was that something you embraced early on, was the training, or was it something that was forced on you, shall we say, because things broke down and things weren't going as well and you sought out some more education? And we will talk more about the education as we go.
We were probably already in it. I mean, we had a desire to change things. It couldn't keep going as it was. I mean, for us to keep growing, we needed to keep moving forward. So we went looking for the education, and I think it was fortunate because it probably overcame a lot of the challenges that we would have incurred otherwise.
Because I think a lot of families make the mistake of focusing all on, we've got to improve this, so we need to work harder in the business. Again, more profit, more scale, more size, more success. Whereas really what you've said is go work on the people and then we'll get a better result at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it was all about just building the foundation, like to make that solid so that we can build on top of that for generations to come.
So do you think the education side of things was possibly the linchpin in this? That personal mindset, it's the growth, it's learning how to deal with each other. Was that the real game changer for you?
Definitely, yeah, and I think Meagan would agree. It's and not only to be able to deal with other people, but deal with ourselves. So, we understood why we did the things we did and why we said the things we said and why we flew off the handle when we flew off the handle. Once we could understand that, we knew what triggered us and how to manage that.
And so, Meagan, from your point of view with the education and the kids, like obviously education's important to you. Have you championed that with your children, or have you let them just find their own way?
We've suggested, that they educate themselves as much as they can, but on farm, it was what they enjoyed doing. If they enjoyed cattle work, or Alex obviously enjoyed being with Andrew, working on machinery. But the biggest thing is when we were together as a family, or we have a family meeting, everyone was involved, and the boys' partners and Jess's partner as well. And that will continue on.
That's a real rarity, I find. So most of the families that come to me and we have that conversation, it's like, do you have family meetings? And the first answer is, well, no, we did once or we did twice and then we got busy and we just talked about the farm. So you started having family meetings early. How old were your kids when you started those sorts of basic conversations?
They were with us when they were 2 and 3 years old, when we were having meetings with Andrew's mum and dad and the family. So they were involved from a very young age. And then we started our own meetings with them when they got partners and started talking about coming back to the farm.
Yeah, because it's interesting. I did an interview with the Lord family at Beef Week this year. So if anyone wants to go and have a listen to that, it came out a few months ago. And one of the things I spoke to them about was they started family meetings the same thing. They went through a similar education process to yourself. And I know Nico and Jade, who are in their late 30s and have taken over the business, and they've done a great job like you guys have. And they said they had their first family meeting the other day, and they had I think it's the 7-year-old and the 5-year-old in the room trying to have a discussion, and they do talk about balance sheets and debt and business plans and all that sort of stuff. So it gets into the psyche. I've tried that with my daughter, and I get a whole lot of eye rolling, but I still do it. Did you find that it was well received by the kids, or did you have to sort of foster that a little bit more?
No, it was very well received. I think they loved the way that we were just so open and honest, and, they were with us all the time. Whatever we were doing, the kids were always involved. Yep. And that's how you create a nice, strong family.
Yeah, because it's interesting. One of the stats I read was that 25% of the reason succession plans fail is because of a lack of preparation of the heirs. We prepare the next generation to be good cotton farmers, breed good cattle, all those sorts of things, but we don't teach them to be business owners. And so we neglect that until they get into their 30s or 40s, and then all of a sudden, we better start having these family meetings. And then a lot of the concepts are so, I suppose you'd say, foreign. And so I'm guessing your kids had a really good vernacular. They understood personal development. They understood the restrictions that you were operating under with debt and seasons and all those sorts of things. Did you find that was really healthy for setting them up to be, how shall we say, less entitled?
100%, yeah. I guess when I grew up with my parents, they were very strict, but I always felt safe and loved, and I wanted that for our children. They've been through some highs and lows with us, and we've had floods and lots of things happening, but they've always been there, help us out, watch what we're doing, and they're learning from us all the time. So it's important to involve them in everything we've done.
And one of the things I find, Andrew, that a lot of families get really terrified by, and I see this all the time, is that if we show our children what we're worth, so we show them a balance sheet with X number of millions and then debt, the two greatest fears for them is, one is they'll tell their friends or they'll feel entitled. Our balance sheet's $100 million or $10 million or $5 million. We can afford that. And the second thing is they get scared by debt. How did you find introducing the kids at the younger age to that? Did you find that was a problem, or it didn't even come into the picture?
It just that exposure from a young age, so that they'd seen it and they saw the good, the bad and the ugly, like Meagan said. I mean, they'd see how much debt it was in, and so you can get comfortable with it without actually having it, so that those numbers just, you've seen them before and it's not so scary. Whereas honestly, when my brother and I got into it, we were largely debt-free, and so it was pretty confronting to pull on any sort of level of debt. So for our kids to have grown up with it, I think it's given them a bit of an advantage.
Excellent. Well, now we're going to pass over. Liam, if you can play the next question. We've got Alex, hopefully coming on the screen. I recorded a quick interview because I wanted everyone to hear from the next generation as well. And Alex is, just really quickly, an engineer. He works for Swarm Farm, who I'm sure you all know as an electrical engineer, and looks like we're right to go, Liam. So, Alex, mate, thanks for coming here today. I know everyone's really keen to hear what you've got to say, but you're a 27-year-old electrical engineer working for Swarm Farm, and you're off farm, obviously, and your first child is now 6 months old, so it's a pretty exciting time of life for you, mate, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Definitely very exciting with the first child here, a new challenge for us, but been enjoying every moment of it, and yeah, just good fun. Excellent.
Now, you've started going through the succession process with mum and dad over the last 12 months, I believe. And with mum and dad having have gone through the succession themselves with dad's parents and also his brother, that gives them a good understanding of sort of what worked and what didn't work and what could do better. So what I'd like to sort of get a bit of an idea of, Alex, is how did the initial conversation start off with you and your siblings and mum and dad?
Yeah, it started off as probably quite informal conversations, pretty easygoing. There's this opportunity. Who does anyone want to come back? And yeah, we would have those conversations every time we caught up, kind of thing. No real timelines were discussed at that point. It was just mum and dad gauging interest, I guess. And then probably a few years ago, we started talking about having a desire to actually, in a few years' time, we'd like to come back and starting to get involved. And at that point, mum and dad wanted to start getting a little bit more clarity around what that meant. And so they approached Proactive, company we worked with, to help mediate some of those conversations. And yeah, at that point, the conversations got a little bit more in detail, and they helped draw out exactly what everyone was looking for and start to gain a bit more clarity around everything.
Yeah. So without getting into the nuts and bolts, because obviously sometimes these conversations are quite private, but was it good that everyone got to have their say and flesh everything out in a facilitated type situation?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely good just to have someone else there asking those questions that maybe you don't want to ask your family, you don't want to upset anyone or something, but they'll draw out what exactly do you want. So it was definitely very good for us understanding what each other wanted. And in some ways it raised a lot more questions, but I think they're the right questions to be talking about now.
I think that's an important point, Alex, is if the unsaid things are quite often the problems in families. So being able to find I hesitate to use the words, but a safe type of space where people can express what they're looking for and then work through those. And even if it does create problems or create more questions and answers, at least you can then allocate some time later on to fixing them rather than them turning up 5 to 10 years later with misunderstandings, etc.
Yeah, definitely. Yep. It was definitely helpful for us.
Now, Alex, if there's other young people out there around your age group, mate, that are back on the farm or looking at heading back to the farm, what's a little bit of advice you give to them if they're in a similar position to you to be able to keep things moving forward and get a good outcome?
Yeah, probably the biggest thing would be, if you are finding yourself in these conversations, to get it out there on the table, what you actually want. Don't kind of hold back. You probably make it worse for everyone by not saying what you actually want. Then you can actually have the discussions and work out together what's possible.
It's interesting, Alex. I think that's a really important one, because someone said to me once, a conflict or an argument postponed is an argument magnified. So it's better off to have the conversations around conflicting ideas early on and sort them out as a family, which I'm sure you're practicing and doing at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Not that there's been any huge arguments for us, I don't think, but it's good to have everything out there anyway.
Excellent. Thanks very much for today.
No worries.
Well, there you go. The technology worked. How good's that? We were going to try and Zoom him in live, but we just figured there'd be way too many things up in the air. So, Andrew, from your point of view, mate, like listening there, what triggered you to first say, we need to get serious about this? What was the trigger for you?
When it could have been any of the kids, but when the boys started to show interest, and Alex had for a little while, he'd sort of penciled his name in there to say, yes, he was interested, wasn't sure when it was going to be, and then it came out of the blue when Sam sort of put his head up and going, I wouldn't mind being involved in this too. So it was really refreshing that he had the courage to, to say that he wanted to be a part of it.
And so do you get some cheap deals with Swarm Farm?
Not yet.
So, Meagan, from your point of view, and I don't want to get into the specifics, but, when you start as a family to have those alternative points of view, how have you managed to get past them? Where you hit that roadblock where someone wants something, someone wants to do something else. How have you managed to get through those over time?
We've encouraged all the kids to sort of work off farm, and work for someone else. And then, if they wanted to, they could always come back and work on the farm. And I guess that wasn't really talked about until they sort of got married and had partners, and they're starting to think about their futures, and that's when the conversation started. So every time we got together with the kids, we'd sort of allocate some time just to sit down. What are their goals for the future? Where do they see themselves in the next 5 years? And that's where we, got to the point where we knew that the boys were keen to come home, and that's why we started this process.
Did it terrify you, Andrew?
No, it was really refreshing and encouraging and exciting and all those things. You start to go, well, we better get going because we've got a lot of work to do.
And the interesting part is, did you find that it actually motivated you more when you started to figure out, we've got this next generation coming through? Did it motivate you to start driving forward? That's
a good question, Ben.
Maybe I should ask Meagan.
we were cruising along. We were going pretty well. I guess it just means that you can't afford to get too comfortable. Keep pushing as long as you can keep pushing.
Excellent. Last month when we started chatting about this, Andrew, we talked through a whole lot of reasons why the succession worked before. And one of the things you wrote down on your notes, you said, Ben, I want to get this out to everyone, was you mentioned about separating the land assets from the business assets. So separate the two. Now, you thought that was a really important point that a lot of people miss. What did you mean by that, and why do you think it's so important?
To have the land enterprise identified as a separate enterprise just makes it a whole lot clearer. You can operate, or we operate, the livestock business outside of the land enterprise. So it means if you've got someone that wants to operate that livestock enterprise on that same piece of land, they're able to without having ownership of the land. So it makes it's an easy step into being able to run something, being able to manage something without necessarily having the ownership. So it's a starting point for that learning process.
Do you see it as a bit of an asset protection tool as well?
Yeah, it also gave us the chance to identify that desire, whether it was just about working in the business or whether it was about raising a family on the land, just to keep ticking off those things and checking those boxes to make sure people's intent, finding out where people's intent was, I guess, was important to us.
And you've got your daughter who lives in Brisbane. And so, Meagan, was there a time where you thought, you know, we're talking about the farm here, we don't need to involve her in these discussions, or did you always think she should come into the room plus all the partners as well?
No, she is definitely in the room for all our meetings. She's part of the family. Even though she doesn't want to work on farm, she was involved in all the meetings because she had great ideas also. And if the boys do get ownership of the land, she'll receive an early inheritance, which we discussed in our meeting. And
partners, like wives and husbands and partners, are all involved in the family meetings too?
Yes, definitely.
Because I'm guessing there's a few people in this room squirming in their chairs thinking, oh dear, imagine if we did that. Was that a really positive thing?
Yeah, the partners are part of our family and they've been included from the start, and I think it's really important.
Go on, Andrew.
It's just interesting to think back on how we thought about it when we were getting involved in the business, and we have to take the same approach that Mum and Dad took with us, that, you know, there was a risk that if they handed over the land to Meagan and I and, you know, heaven forbid there's a divorce or something down the track, there's a real risk that you lose that asset. But somewhere along the line, you raise your kids, you teach them the values, and you've got to set them free, you've got to let them go. So we just take the stance that they'll make good decisions and choose good partners, and the rest will be what it'll be.
But again, you said before you've got a lot of outside help, so I'm guessing you're being smart and structuring things appropriately and putting some level of protection in place to make sure that at least there's a little bit of a backup as well.
There is in the early terms, but I mean, there comes a point where that moves along, and I guess it's through that testing phase you work out whether they're up to it or not.
And did you find that was, Meagan, from your point of view, really well received? Because when you approached and said, we'd like everyone to be involved in these meetings because you're all part of my family, did that enhance the relationships with everyone, do you feel? Yeah,
it definitely made the conversations easy. I think the family's stronger for it. But the children, in the end of that 2-day meeting, they said that Andrew and I are the priority and our retirement plan is number one. We have to look after ourselves first.
Yeah, that's a pretty important point, isn't it? You know, this is where succession hasn't modernised these days. You know, 50, 60 years ago, life expectancy was, 65, 70 years of age. So mum and dad would retire, have a couple of good years and then drop off the perch. And that was the succession plan. We used to call that a frog succession plan. You'll get it when I croak. Whereas nowadays people are living to 80, 90. Both my grandfathers died at 97 and 92. And you go, we're getting older and older. And so are you starting to think about your retirement now more and more as time's coming along? I'll start with you, Andrew, because I can see that terrified look, that R word.
Yeah, I don't ever want to retire. I mean, I just keep doing whatever I can do until I can't do it anymore. I think that's what it is for me. I know that Meagan's made some allowances for the way we live our life, and I guess I'm open to being flexible enough to meet her as to where she wants to supposedly retire, but not for me.
Again, it'll be a discussion, will it? And that's a pretty important point, isn't it? Because retirement is a really scary word for especially us blokes. I remember I talked to my dad when he was about 58 about the R word, and he just about chased me off the farm, whereas I mentioned it to mum, she's like, oh yeah, when's that going to be? It's really important, and a lot of families don't consider that retirement has to happen. You have to have that transition of power or responsibility over time, but retirement can be whatever you want it to be. It can be you stay on the farm and, I don't know, you're a mechanic by trade, aren't you, or a fitter by trade. Maybe you like fixing tractors all the time. I'm guessing probably not, but maybe you do. But it's being able to plan ahead to be able to actually do what you want to do long term. And if you don't have a good succession plan behind you, well, then it's not going to be a great environment to live in, is it?
No, and I think the it's good to tell the children that I'm definitely retiring. But I'm still available for mustering, cattle work or babysitting. But, yeah, I'd still like to be involved in the business but not have, the everyday business worries that we've got at the moment, just to be able to just relax and do cattle work and mustering.
Someone said to me once, Meagan, they said the greatest succession plan is when you get back and get employed by your children.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Some days I feel like my daughter's already employing me and telling me what to do. So I'm going to tread on a landmine here, which we sort of touched on before, didn't we? And I want to go into this because I think it's really important. But one of the things I find with families, or I've observed, is quite often you get this 1 or 2 generations of families that work really hard, have a good work ethic, and they do all the right things and they've got strong values. And then all of a sudden we pop up with a generation that turns out to be spoiled and entitled. And quite often good people are left scratching their heads going, my parents worked hard, we worked hard, and we've just got these kids that just don't want to have a go. We're really lacking that. And I know in the succession space, even just a sprinkling of entitlement in either generation can be catastrophic. It's just a real poison to things. And on the surface, and knowing the family and looking around, you seem to have raised a generation of hardworking, conscientious, but also really grateful children. Like I know when I had that conversation with Alex off the air, he was just so grateful for the opportunity he's been given, not only to get an education, but also have the opportunity to come back and be able to take on the family business. But he really had this drive to say, but I want to make sure mum and dad are okay. And that's not as common as you'd think. So I know you talked about your parents, but how did you sort of raise the kids, do you think, in hindsight, to sort of eke out that potential of more entitlement?
I guess we were pretty strict with them. They've always had roles and responsibilities on the farm. When they came home and worked, they got paid for what they did. And I think that's important. And they worked for neighbours, and a lot of the time they just did things just out of the goodness of their heart too, which I think is important about giving back. So that's what we sort of taught them.
And did you teach them, I'm guessing you taught them the value of money, introducing the balance sheets, profit and losses, and having family meetings. They'd have understood the behind the scenes working of everything. And it's not just, swipe the credit card and the magic bank gives you money.
Yeah, 100%. When we did grazing for profit, and the boys both did it as well, and they came home asking us about our figures and our direct costs and why they were so high. And, yeah, working through budgets, that's something they're learning as well, which I think is really important.
And Andrew, did you, obviously you raised them to be able to, you run a cattle place, so raise them how to grow a heap of beef. Did you actually actively spend time talking to them about business and the business of farming rather than just cattle production?
Just the fact that we had them involved along the way. I was lucky enough that Dad taught me that hard work is a privilege, and we were able to pass that on with our kids. So, we could be out physically working, fixing fences, working cattle, and having those conversations about how do we lift production from what we've got, and then at the end of the day go home and run through some numbers. And they were exposed to that stuff from an early age, and it wasn't forced on them, but definitely if they asked the question, they got as much as we could give them.
Now I do remember, Meagan, something about, was it an 18th or a 21st birthday present? Was it the 21st or 18th? 21st.
21st.
So you wait till you hear this, everyone. So do you all remember back to when you were 21 and what you wanted for your birthday? A nice new ute or a trip overseas? What did your kids get?
They got a grazing for profit course.
And they were grateful?
They said it's the best thing they've ever done. Very grateful.
In hindsight?
Bottle of rum would have probably been better.
Cheaper. But you've actively encouraged them to do the same training that you've done, haven't you?
Yeah, they've all done low stress stock handling, grazing for profit and landmark.
Yeah, and you've also helped them get university or tertiary type education and trades. You've encouraged them to do that as well and not just come back to the farm? Yeah,
100%. And during that time, Andrew was working 2 jobs to get him through uni.
2 jobs?
Oh, 2 or 3. It just, whatever it took. But they knew and understood what we were doing for them. So I guess that's what's made them so gracious for the opportunity rather than being handed, a chunk of change. They only got so much going through uni, and if they needed more, then they had to find more. So Jess has worked in part-time jobs since she was 13, 14, and yeah, the kids have had jobs all the way through. Alex was a brickies labourer while he was going to uni, and yeah.
Brickies labourer, that would have been a tough gig.
Yeah, and I sat him down one day and I said, "Hey, how's that going for you, mate?" And he said, "I love the challenge. Just love the challenge of having to keep up throwing bricks and mixing mud."
And did you rescue them? Because that's the other big thing is when kids go off to uni, like you've made them actually work for it rather than just saying, here's another 4 years to just relax.
No, they got an allowance, and once that ran out, that's it. They had to do whatever they could to live.
And someone said to me once, they said, don't steal your child's privilege of them doing it tough. So one of the things I'd also want to get into now is the mistake a lot of families make is that single event succession. Something happens, like we talked about before, someone dies, someone gets ill, someone wakes up one day and goes, that's it, I've had it, I'm out. And they forget that succession is a process. And I personally think that succession shouldn't be a separate thing. It should just be part of your business practices. You should be, if you look outside of agriculture and you look at families that have got big businesses, they start preparing their heirs at a young age. They prepare them to run the business. They prepare them to manage the family wealth, to be able to be good custodians of that wealth, all those sides of things. So how early, if you were talking to people and they came along and said, we've got young kids, we're looking into the future, how early do you think families should be starting to look at succession?
Start now. Start as soon as you can. Just expose them to something. We haven't really stopped. Even from going through it the first time, we might have taken a bit of a breath to consolidate things, but as soon as we'd done that, you're basically thinking about the next generation and what do you leave from? I mean, we were lucky enough to be given a go, so that's the least we could do is give another generation a chance to have a go.
Because that's really important, isn't it? Why are you doing this? And have you had a chat between yourselves? Because one of the things families forget is why we're doing this. More acres, more country, more cattle, whatever it might be, more. But did you actually actively sit down and go, why the hell are we doing this? What is the reason for doing this? And do your children understand that? Hopefully.
Yeah, I think it's just that consistent conversations. When it comes to our why for doing it, it's all about having a family that wants to spend time together. It's not a chore. We look forward to it, as they do, and that's why we do it.
Meagan?
Yeah, we've seen families in the past. Andrew's father and his brother don't talk. They haven't spoken for 30 years, so I've seen some things that I don't want to happen to our family, so I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. And
Meagan, from your point of view, because quite often I can see people coming from outside of a position have such a better view of things because you didn't grow up on the land and then you came and married onto the land. Did you see things for what they were far better than the people in the middle of it? No, not really. It was very foreign to me because I guess I came from a very close family and it just didn't seem that way. Like there was a lot of tension in the air and it was, very different for me. But I could see that, we all needed help, and that's why that process started of getting that facilitation and education we needed to resolve that. How was it when Meagan first came back? Did she look at you, Andrew, and go, what the bloody hell have we done here? Did that happen a few times in the 7 years? Oh, definitely, especially at the start. And I mean, looking back, I made some of the dumbest decisions you could make. I mean, we turned up at home with 2 young kids and one on the way, and Mum and Dad still living in the house that was built when they got married and building another cottage that wasn't finished. And so, we had some challenges. We really did. But, we all were pretty confident we knew what direction we wanted to go. So one way or another, we just had to keep chipping away at it, keep taking a step, take a step, and you get through it. And did you ever look back and go, I've been a diesel fitter for 15 years, I think it was. Why don't I just go back and be a diesel fitter? That would be so much easier. Did you get to that point or were you totally committed? No, I was committed. Once we were gone, we were gone. And it was what I'd wanted to do for a long time. It had taken me so long to get back there. Yeah, and I left a good paying job to go back to probably not a good paying job, but I don't regret a minute of it. I really don't. And the fact that we could bring the kids up there, that's
that's what's made it worthwhile for me. I can't speak for Meagan, but that's what's made it worthwhile for me.
How about you, Meagan? Did you ever say one day, we need to go back to diesel fitting?
No, I always wanted to meet a nice country boy and live on the farm, so this is my dream come true.
It's on tape, all recorded. Now, Andrew, you've got that forever now. Excellent. Well, look, we're starting to get to the end. We're going to have time for questions, so we'll start to save those up. But I just want to end up with, just based on your experience as a family, and again, you've been through that process with your parents, you saw what worked, you saw what didn't work, you're now going through with your kids. And I think that's the secret to all of this, is the fact of we need to learn what works, what doesn't work, and keep pushing forward. But if you're looking around the audience out here, or anyone who's going to be listening online, I just want to start with you, Meagan, is what's one quick piece of advice you'd give any family out here at the moment based on your experience?
To have regular structured meetings with a time frame. I used to take minutes and an agenda, and everyone in the family is invited to attend.
Invited or compelled?
Invited.
Because that's an interesting thing. That's part of that stepping up. If they're not committed to it, well, we can see that straight away, can't we? And so were you the champion of the family meetings, in the sense you were the one that made them always happen?
No, we sort of allocated roles and responsibilities to those people who would organise a meeting and send that email through, date and time, and I did the minutes. Andrew was usually chairperson.
And the interesting thing, I'm guessing by the sounds of things, because they happen, it's because you led by example and made sure you were both there for the meetings. Because that's a mistake I see a lot of families make, is they say we're going to do family meetings, mum and dad don't follow through, so then the kids go, oh, well, these meetings aren't important, who cares? And off they go, never had them. So I'm guessing both of you were committed to that?
Yeah, 100%. Yep. And the whole family was committed as well.
Andrew, what's your one piece of advice, mate?
Listen more than you speak. And just make a start, take a step, keep working your way through it, and keep going until you get an action, even just one action. Keep going till you get an action.
What happens if you hit a roadblock, i.e. we start to get into a bit of an argument or a strong differing of opinions?
Yeah, we had multiple meetings where we've just shut them down and gone, well, that's as far as we're going today, and we'll pick it up again next time. It just gives everyone a chance to recalibrate, yeah.
And did that work?
Yep. A couple of beers later and we were all good again.
Because my wife said to me once, and I've said this on the podcast 100 times, but we were having a discussion, Meagan, once, and she said to me, she looked at me and she said, do you want to be right or happy? And of course I said, what did I say, Andrew?
Happy.
No, much smarter than I am. I think I said right. And then I thought about it for a while and went, I take happy. And I think that's a really important point as well, is like you're going to have these meetings. If you are going to have disagreements, you've got to sort of think what's important. If family is important to you, well, let's focus on that. Let's remember and let's forgive each other. And then do we want to be right or do we want to be happy, and try and find some common ground? Excellent. Well, thanks, everyone. That concludes the interview portion. We might throw it out to some questions if anyone's got some curly ones. Got one just in the middle there.
Tony Quigley, look, thanks for your presentation. Being honest like that and talking in front of a crowd is really hard, so well done, both of you, thank you. Question I've got is about off-farm assets and whether they help, and I don't know who this question's to, it might even be Ben, off-farm assets and whether they help with both retirement and also off-farm siblings.
The simple answer is yes. A lot of families that I used to see over the years, they'd come to you, they'd look at succession, no off-farm assets. You talk about equalisation of the estate or sharing amongst siblings. You look at debt reduction, retirement funding, etc. If there's no off-farm assets, that's an extra hurdle you've got to get over. If you've got enough off-farm assets to be able to retire on, that makes the job a whole lot easier. Now, the issue is for most people is they say, well, there's no money, it's all going back into the farm, debt reduction, etc. But the sooner you start, the earlier you start with small amounts, get it built. And it's just going to be one more thing you don't have to deal with when it comes to the retirement or succession plan.
I might just jump in there, Ben. Andrew, Meagan, you mentioned that you've sought external parties. Who have you got involved in that part of it? Obviously, you've gone down the track with a facilitator. Who else have you got involved in that process?
To date, it's just been working with Proactive. We engaged them to start with our current family succession plan. So at the end of, I think it was about 6 months all up, we'd done a few phone interviews. It was about a 20-page questionnaire each. Then we got together for a couple of days and hashed out a plan. It was pretty rough, but it was a starting point. It's already been adjusted since then, but we kind of all know where we want to go with it. Yeah, and they were exposed to our last 5 years of P&L through those meetings as well, so that they knew how we'd been going or how we hadn't been going. I just wondered if Fletch was angling to say we had a good bank manager along the way as well.
Well, I was going to ask the question, who was your best bank manager and why, Amy?
Alistair Rogers, rural property valuer. The pie is only so big, the farm. You're currently in your status and your generation. The next generation is going to represent a few more bods. How do you cut the pie?
We've also got a soil carbon enterprise. A lot of our succession discussion is built around the income that'll generate. So, yeah, we've still got a desire to grow the pie before we, I guess, divide it up for a better word. But even early on, we've indicated to the boys that the best thing they could do is operate together. That's probably their greatest strength, especially early on. So, I mean, we can only start the process and they can sort it out from there.
Yeah, plus we've also discussed in our meeting about giving Jess an early inheritance, as she doesn't want to be part of the cattle business.
Yeah, so I guess that early, it's not necessarily about fair and even, it's about what she's comfortable with, and she also understands that if she wants her fair share, then it just becomes unviable.
Thank you for sharing your story. Meagan, just right at the beginning, you said something about working on yourselves. I'm just wondering what, in a practical sense, that actually means.
I guess it's more about communication with our family and understanding things that have happened in our lives, how we've held on to that, have trust issues. So through landmark education, it opened up our communication within the family and to be a better person.
Thank you for sharing your story, so inspiring. So how do you, keep your family, united and motivate them if any one of your sons are not interested in this business? So if anyone wants to go out or take some of the share of the business, how do you keep them united?
I guess it's about having them involved in the business. It's not, especially early on, it's not about the land asset. It's about operating the business. And, I mean, they don't even need to operate the business on the land that we've currently got. So to get them a foot in the door in operating a business is how we start that. I don't know if I answered your question then.
You talked about getting the kids involved at a young age. Do you think there's a risk that you influence what the kids want to do in the future if they haven't really explored, as they're growing up through their teenage years, early 20s, what they actually do want to do?
I don't know that was ever a concern for us. They've been able to do whatever. They were never pressured at all to be involved in the businesses at home. And Meagan and I had discussions about, well, what happens if we need to skip a generation, then so be it. We might lease it out to somebody else, or if they didn't want to be involved, then they didn't have to be involved. It was just that we opened the conversation around that opportunity for them.
Sorry, my 2 cents worth. One of the things is I think a lot of families just don't have the discussion all, and they don't talk through the business opportunities that are available and also the downsides of that opportunity, so that the kids can sort of see with transparency, go out, see the world, get a trade, travel, get a career, whatever they want to do, and then they come back with their eyes wide open. So I think if you don't show them that, they'll either go away and go, oh, this farming game's terrible, I don't want to be involved, or on the other side, they'll see it with rose-coloured glasses and then want to come back. So I think the more transparent you can be with them, say there's an opportunity here, but it's going to take work. And I think that also knocks down that potential of the entitlement as well.
Just a question, maybe to you, Andrew. I think you had a brother originally. Can you just talk about where he is, or did you split a business, or what happened? Has he got a succession plan?
We separated out the land business when Mum and Dad exited the business. So he got a share and I got a share of the land, and we operate independently on that. We still collaborate occasionally, borrow gear, help one another. So we're both operating separately. And so that was Dad's original land asset that we separated up.
Hello, this is Manish Daga from Cotton Guru, India. I am very sorry to miss part of the conversation. I was in another session. But we are a 4th-generation company into agriculture in India. So what is the major challenge that you have faced convincing the Gen Next, because they are focused more on return on money and economics, and you would have some values. So in terms of what to grow and where to market, what is the biggest challenge you have faced till now, and how did you handle that?
So just to make sure we've got the question right. So it was, what's the biggest challenge with dealing with Gen X? Yes. Is that what you're saying, with the next generation?
Yes, how do you gel with them and how do you align with their thoughts and their aspirations?
Yep, excellent. So who would like to take that on board?
Oh, I can have a go. I think our next generation understands that the current enterprise in its current state may not be able to support everything they want. So if they need to supplement that with off-farm or other businesses, I mean, this is just a piece of their pie. It's not the be-all and end-all. That's definitely what motivated us, and I'm pretty sure that's what motivates them. It's just that foot in the door. It's the chance to get a little bit of a start that perhaps some others wouldn't get.
And I think there's always been that tension between the generations right through. I mean, I look at myself with my dad, I look at my dad with his dad, and vice versa. I think that's just normal. I think it's quite healthy. And one of the things we find is that strapping in the next generation can actually be a real shot in the arm for the business, different thinking. I think a big mistake a lot of families make, again, is not listening to the next generation. So actually ignoring them because they haven't got experience, but listening to them, listening to the ideas. You don't have to adopt them all. You can let them run. But someone said to me the other day, when their son would come back with 100 ideas, they go, great, go do your research, get all the information and come back and pitch me. And he said something like 99 out of the 100 ideas would get researched, and then literally one would come back 3 months later. And so he said, I'd never shut them down, but I allowed them to bring them to me and then think through. Fantastic. Excellent. Well, look, thanks very much. I just want to thank Meagan and Andrew for coming along. So if we could all put together our hands. Well, there we go. Done and dusted again. Another interview with a high-performing family. If you happen to know any real high-performing families out there that have done succession, done it well, and are willing to have a conversation with me, I'd love to hear from them. We're trying to share more and more stories about families that have succeeded, have done well against all the odds. So, yeah, reach out. Now, if you've got any questions, drop me an email, ben@thefinancialbloke.com.au. And, hey, any comments on the socials are always appreciated. And if you can share this with your family and friends, I know there's a lot of people out there going through the succession process. I mean, hell, at the conference or the Cotton Conference, every single person I spoke to said succession's an issue. We know so many people that are thinking about it. So if you wouldn't mind sharing it with your family and friends, that would be absolutely amazing. Well, thanks for investing your time. That's it for today. We'll see you with some more wealth and wisdom.